Well, hi everyone. Welcome to This Is Going to Hurt, Threat Hunting with the Pyramid of Pain. Great to see you all here. Really excited to have you here for this one today. I don't know if anyone here has actually been on our other events focusing on the Security Operations Centre. We've had a little mini series going. This is the last one, which is obviously a little bit sad. But yeah, really glad you can join us now. Because this is the last one, if anyone has the time to just drop us a little bit of feedback on obviously this one, if you've attended them all or a couple, then just feedback on the whole series. We would definitely really appreciate that. It will really help us for when we're curating events for next year. But yeah, thank you very much for your time, and I will hand over to Curtis.
Thanks, Em. Hi everyone, thank you for joining. I'm Curtis, one of the Level 2 SOC analysts here at Clarinet, and today I'm going to be talking to you about threat hunting with the Pyramid of Pain. On the agenda today, we'll be going through threat hunting, what is it, why we do it, and then we'll be going into what the Pyramid of Pain is. We'll be breaking down sections of the pyramid, then looking at what I would call real threat hunting versus IOC or indicator of compromise hunting. And then following that, I'll be showing you a live demo hunt against Lazarus Group using Microsoft Sentinel. First, let's have a look at what threat hunting is. So to find our advanced persistent threats, or APTs in our estate, we need to use the tools that we've got, sure, but we also need to rely on the human instinct and that human curiosity that our analysts have to just dig that little bit deeper. Threat hunting is performing searches outside of the analytics our tools normally use. So this is hunting specific activity based on hypotheses or what we think is happening right now. This could be an actor, a known piece of malware, or a vulnerability that's being exploited in the wild currently. And the reason we use threat hunting searches rather than normal alarm rules is because they may be too loud, maybe too vague, and having these as normal analytics would put a lot of strain on a SOC. So why do we threat hunt? It comes down to the real world of corporate cybersecurity that isn't stopping the bad guys and saving the world. It's about stopping your organization from losing money due to attacks or due to operational damage. Most attackers are motivated by money, and the majority of the groups that we're seeing today are organized crime groups. These aren't just a bunch of kids in hoodies, these are legitimate businesses. So they hire external contractors, they hire software developers, they hire ransom negotiators, and this costs a lot of money. So when they decide to attack you as a business, they're launching a project, they're dedicating resource to attacking you, and our goal of threat hunting is to make them use more resource. The goal is to make them think, you know what, let's go and attack another organization where we need to dedicate less time to writing exploits and developing different techniques. Our main aim is to not be that low-hanging fruit and be the target that isn't worth it, because when we stop a threat actor's project from being profitable, they have no reason to attack you. Now, let's look into hunting where it hurts with the Pyramid of Pain. So what is this triangle of terror, this Dorito of doom? Well, it's a conceptual model developed by SANS instructor, David Bianco. And its purpose is to measure the effectiveness of indicators that we use in threat hunting and that we gain from threat intelligence. Breaking it down, we've got two halves. So we've got the top half, which I associate with real threat hunting, and then the bottom half, which I associate with IOC hunting. The top half has some of our harder to use indicators. So these are tactics, techniques, and procedures, as according to MITRE. And then we have our tools that attackers may use, followed by network and host artifacts. These could be registry edits, files dropped, and that sort of thing. Apologies there. And towards the bottom half of the pyramid, we have domain names, IP addresses, and hash values. These are usually exact matches based off previous activity from a threat actor. So let's look at threat hunting versus IOC, or indicator of compromise in hunting. Threat hunting uses the top half of the pyramid, so that's our TTPs, the tools, and the network/host artifacts. It takes a longer time to create these searches as they require research by analysts, the translation of that research into searches that work with our tools. Because we're using more generic indicators, there's a medium to high false positive rate, and that's why we don't use them as analytic searches. However, threat hunting is more likely to find attacks earlier on in that kill chain, and it finds some of the more subtle activity that attackers do before they drop ransomware. IOC hunting, on the other hand, uses the bottom half of the pyramid. So that's our domains, IP addresses, and file hashes. And because these are exact strings, it's really easy to make a search out of them. Because they are very specific indicators, they have a really low false positive rate. However, these indicators tend to come from the latter stages and the louder stages of an attack. So think about IPs for a command and control server, or file hashes for a piece of malware or for a piece of ransomware. And I'll tell you now, you don't need to threat hunt for ransomware file hashes. If you have this on your estate, the attackers will save you a lot of time by just leaving a little note on your desktop. Now, as any good multi-level marketing firm will tell you, the bottom of the pyramid has an important role. So our domain names, our IP addresses, file hashes, they're really good indicators with a low false positive rate, and they have places in alert enrichment. So what that means is if I'm getting scanned, the scan is coming from an IP. We can use our known indicators of compromise to have a list of IPs and who they're attributed to. So when that alert comes in, it's more than just a scan. It's a scan from this particular group, which can then act as a trigger for a threat hunt. So with some of the theory out of the way, let's jump into our demo today, which is going to be a threat hunt against Lazarus Group using Microsoft Sentinel. A little bit of background on these guys. We've got a MITRE ID of the group, and that's G0032. And that's the MITRE ID used to track different groups and map them to tactics, techniques, and procedures. They're associated with Labyrinth, Kalima, and Hidden Cobra, and these can be either splinter groups or aliases of the same group. Sometimes it runs under a bit of an umbrella group. And the nation-state-backed advanced persistent threat from North Korea, and they've been active since around 2009. Bit of a loadout check. We're going to be running with Microsoft Sentinel, which is Microsoft's SOAR platform. It's got a lot of tools that we can use to leverage in the cloud, such as automated hunting queries, fusion rules, playbooks. And today we're going to be looking at a reactive hunt based off an incident that's been triggered due to the presence of an IOC. Quick word on reactive and proactive before we jump in. A reactive threat hunt is based off some sort of stimulus coming in, which could be an alert featuring an indicator of compromise, or a known news article that a certain industry has been attacked, and that can lead to a hypothesis that there's a known attacker on the estate, or that there's a certain malware being used, and we can threat hunt to stop them being any further down the chain than they already might be. A proactive threat hunt's mainly based off inspiration and threat intelligence, so that's knowing what might be going on in your industry or in your customers' industries. And these are searches based off blog posts, searches based off threat intelligence feeds that analysts may see and think, is this happening on my estate? Is this happening on my customer's estate? And they can identify previously unknown breaches that might not have that little early indicator alert. So let's jump in. I'm going to switch now to Microsoft Sentinel. And we're going to go into an incident that we have here called Lazarus Group IOC in network traffic. So this is using the bottom half of our pyramid to have an alert that's enriched with an IOC. So we're not just seeing a scan, we're seeing a scan potentially from Lazarus Group. And Sentinel's given us some entities here. So we've got a source IP of 1234. That's not an actual Lazarus Group IOC. And we've got our destination host on our internal network. And we've also got what the scan might be. We can look further into our events to see anything else about this scan. And we can see that there's a destination port of 3389. So there's a possibility that our host is either being scanned over RDP, or that the threat actor may have even found a way in through RDP. And because we've had that enriched alert knowing it's Lazarus Group, we can start to perform threat hunts based off the tactics, techniques, and procedures that they use. So if I flip over to MITRE ATT&CK enterprise matrix here, this is a collection of our tactics over the top and our techniques. So threat intelligence can tell us what techniques Lazarus Group use, and we can target our threat hunts based off that. So I've created a couple of threat hunting searches that's looking for obfuscated command lines and looking for ingress of tools, as these are indicators that Lazarus Group usually do. So I can move over to our hunting screen. So what's great with Azure Sentinel is we can run multiple hunts all at the same time. This was previously a very, very manual process. But now I can select as many of these as I want really and run them all at the same time. And this really speeds up our hunting time. The two we're interested in today are common downloaders and PowerShell encoded commands. So let's view the result of our common downloaders. So this hunting query is looking for invoke web request, it's looking for wget curl, and one that's not relatively as known, but certutil can be used to download files as well. And our threat hunt has outputted the command that's triggered this. And we can see the certutil method being used to download putty.exe. So putty.exe is an SSH client. It's used for remoting into other computers, and that can be used for lateral movement. And putty is also a known tool, so remember near the top of that pyramid, that is used by Lazarus. And the output of this is sentinel1 agent _64.exe. So that's a bit of a weird name to call putty. It's definitely normal that people would download putty. However, using the certutil method and obfuscating the name, that's a little bit strange. So what we can do here is get our event and add it as a bookmark. So we're starting the collection of evidence and making sure that we're recording everything we find as part of this threat hunt. So I'm just going to call this putty download renamed file name. And I'm going to create that bookmark. So once that's created, I can go into our next hit, which was the PowerShell encoder commands. So this query is purely looking for the encoded command flag in PowerShell, which is quite common. It's used by admins, it's used by a lot of scripts. So it wouldn't make a lot of sense to have an alert for this because it's happening all the time. It'll lead to a lot of false positives. And we can see the output is this command using the enc flag, and then we've got what appears to be a gibberish string. So this is a string encoded in base 64. It's not encryption, it's encoding, so we can easily reverse this with a Linux command line. We can reverse it with an online tool such as CyberChef. But what we can do with our hunting queries with KQL is we can actually just deliver the decoded output. So for any KQL enthusiasts, I've created a new field where I've split this command line into an array using a space. So we've got three values, PowerShell, -enc, and then our encoded command line. And then I've created a new column called decoded command line, which is just running the third entry of that array into a base 64 decoder. So that way we've already got our decoded command line and our analysts are able to see that straight away without having to go to an extra site. If we look at our decoded command line, it's the use of mshga.exe to launch a HGA file called deldigitaldelivery.hga. Now, that may not be weird, that could be legitimate, but one of the techniques that Lazarus Group use is mshga execution for persistence and to drop malware. So we can save that as a bookmark as well. and I'm just going to call that one MSHGA execution. So that's great. We've done some hunting. We've got 2 bookmarks. But once we've ran these hunts, we don't want to just rely on what we've caught already, because as well, PowerShell encoded commands, they're part of defense evasion. They can happen anywhere in that kill chain. The attacker could easily use that again. So what we can do with Sentinel is add these to a live stream. And what that's going to do is just constantly run this query in the background to see if this activity happens again. So even if we're running hunting queries that don't get hits at the start, but we think this might be part of the attacker's kill chain, we can just have these live stream queries running ready for another attack. So if I switch over to our victim VM now and run another PowerShell encoded command, so this is going to compress a folder into a zip file as part of collection. Shortly after, we'll see our live stream gets a hit, and we can see that another encoded command's being run. So it's important that when we do run these searches, we're not just running it once and saying threat hunt done, we didn't see it. So while we're waiting for that live stream to come in, we'll go back to our bookmarks. So once we've got these bookmarks, we've got a nice little bit of evidence. We've had some entities given, and what we can do is add these to our original incident and enrich that incident with essentially a timeline of events based off our threat hunt. So if I add these both to an existing incident, and we go back, we'll be able to see that our incident isn't just a scan anymore. It's a scan followed by ingress of some tools, followed by MSHGA execution. And we're able to build up a bigger picture of what the attacker's doing based off that threat hunt. I just saw that the live stream query came in, so we'll go back to that just to show you how that's continually picking up encoded commands. And if we open our live stream, we can see we've had another result there. The decoded command line comes out a bit skewed in this, but we can view our query results and look for our decoded command line. And this will show us that we've got a zip file that's being created. See here, compress archives being used to compress secret business info into plunder.zip. So that's something that would happen a lot further down the kill chain. So although we're starting off our threat hunt early, it's really important to have these live stream queries running, or to be continually threat hunting in any way you can to make sure you do catch things happening further down the chain. So we've got our live stream running, we've had some bookmarks, and we've enriched an incident. And from that, we've been able to get a much more detailed picture of what's going on. So I'm going to flip back now to the presentation, and we can look at any questions that you might have. Apologies there. Hannah, are we ready for questions?
Absolutely. That was fantastic, Curtis. Thank you so much. I think there's actually one here. So from Tom, when I go out and threat hunt, are there any good sources of write-ups for existing attacks or APT groups?
So there's a lot of blogs out there. Kevin Beaumont always tends to run a good blog on new threat hunting sources, new 0 days that come out, especially Microsoft related ones. You can also look at OTX, which is an open source threat hunting repository that's got a lot of IOCs in. But yeah, for write-ups, you're generally looking at individual creators like Ken Beaumont, Florian Roth, and just looking at their blog posts to see what they've done threat hunting. You also have the corporate blog posts as well. So most cybersecurity companies will have a blog denoting any threat hunts or any research they've done into threat actors.
Yeah. So just to sum, we'll absolutely follow up with the slides and the recording afterwards. From Ben, it's a good one. What do you most enjoy about using Microsoft Sentinel?
I like how, for me, it makes it quite easy for me to do what I want. I can write out custom analytics all the time. I can run all the threat hunts at once, and anything that needs automating, anything that I think, you know what, that could just be done automatically, can be automated with a playbook. I'll show you one example in the Sentinel instance we have here. So when an analyst gets an external IP, the usual first port of call is to go to a site like Abuse IPDB or perform a whois lookup of some kind to find out where that IP is from. With this Sentinel instance, I've plugged in a playbook that will perform that web request for me and then output the location as a tag in the alert. So that's just saving me that little bit of time having to perform that whois lookup. So yeah, the main thing is just the quality of life things I found with Sentinel as an analyst are great.
Nice. From Derek, how do you start creating hypotheses for threat hunts?
So you create your hypotheses based off what you think is happening. So if you see an IOC from a threat group, you would look up that threat group. What techniques did they do? Where have you seen the IOC? What part of the kill chain is it in now? And then you look down the kill chain, see what techniques they've got down there, and think, okay, well, they've been scanning me. They might be performing initial access with this technique. Then they might be performing persistence with this technique. And that's your hypothesis as to what they're doing. And that's where you would base your hunts.
Yeah. There's one that I actually wanted to ask. So with the run through you've done, it's obviously it's a reactive hunting. When it comes to the proactive hunting, how are we organising that across the SOC, and how are we making sure that different members of the SOC get to focus on different tactics?
So in our SOC, we split out our threat hunting by tactic, and we cover each tactic of the MITRE framework each week, and that's split across all our analysts all the way from junior to senior. So each analyst will be assigned a tactic. They'll go out and look at recent blog posts. They'll look at our threat intelligence feeds and find an example of where that tactic is being used right now on estates that are relevant to our customers, and then look at the exact techniques and then form a search based off that. And they'll either run a search from our search bank or create their own search for that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always on though, isn't it, basically?
Yeah, it's a constant weekly rotation of threat hunting across all the tactics.
Yeah. This is one I kind of came across elsewhere actually. So when it comes to using an internal team for threat hunting or an external team, what are the pros and cons? Because I guess with internal, the assumption is that maybe in-house threat hunters are superior because they know the environment better.
Yeah, there's really two sides to that. An internal team will know your estate better, absolutely. However, an external team would probably know your customers, your peers' estates better. So if you're a banking company, your internal team will absolutely know your estate better than an MSP. But the MSP might be looking after 5 other banks and know what's going on just in that general financial sector. And they'll be able to leverage that intelligence and that victim analysis from other companies into yours.
Yeah. So breadth of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
got a question from Daniel here actually. So do you recommend any particular online resources that guide on sector specific IOCs? For example, IOCs against the financial industry?
I recommend either OTX or Mandiant for IOC gathering, and that's just because you can filter these down into specific streams of IOCs for a particular sector. So it's really easy to put filters in and just see IOCs for the healthcare sector.
Yeah. And automation, right? I think it's good for us to talk about that. So where's the balance between manual threat hunting and like, we don't want to automate everything, right? So what do you automate and what do you keep doing manually?
Yeah, if you automate things, you'll end up with what we have normally with analytic rules. And threat hunting really is about that human kind of curiosity to think, well, maybe this is happening, which might be outside of the normal pattern. What we want to automate is a lot of the quality of life things, make our analysts able to do threat hunts at scale. So for example, in Sentinel there, I don't have to run one query at a time. I can select 200 if I want to and run those automatically. But the important part is I'm still selecting those queries and I'm still adding those queries. Yeah. And then I can also go into each one of those and edit a line or two and change what that query is looking for.
And then from Rents, so if there are critical threats found, are you proactively informing the certs for cross-customer intervention?
Yeah, so as soon as we do find something with threat hunting, then that would trigger the appropriate instant response. If we did find something serious, we wouldn't take another hour to do a nice write-up of it. That would be calling out our customers, starting that instant response program so that we can isolate a host before we continue on searching, because we can still build that chain of what's happened after the host has been isolated and after that threat's been contained. So containment is definitely the priority if we do find something.
Yeah, yeah, and with that response as well, I mean, like, this is why SLAs are in place, right?
Yeah.
Good question from Dennis. Do you test your setup using a red team or not?
Yeah, so because I'm lucky enough to work with a SOC that also has a kind of attached red team, we're able to test our analytics versus their exploit attempts and versus their techniques. So it's like having your own personal APT to test this against. So if you do have an organization with a blue team and a red team, absolutely run these exercises. Get the red team to run some exploits on a host and get the blue team to see if they can create hunting searches to find that out.
Okay, well, that was I mean, a whistle-stop tour of threat hunting, right? I think we touched on it in our first webinar with Tom, and I think like there's so much here to unpack. But I mean, that was a really good insight. Oh, actually, sorry, Jamal's just asked, is there any books or courses that you would recommend for threat hunting?
Don't really know any courses off the top of my head. And there is a book on threat hunting. Possibly I can get you the title of that after this. I don't have it off the top of my head.
Yeah, that'd be good. Maybe we can send that across to you, Jamal. Awesome. Tom, should hunts be aligned to MITRE ATT&CK?
They can be aligned to different frameworks. Personally, I think hunts should be aligned to MITRE ATT&CK because that's the best kind of framework we've got at the minute at mapping attackers' techniques. But of course, there's attackers that are creating techniques that aren't in the MITRE framework. So if you're seeing things that don't quite fit in there, it's fine to make those hunts. But the MITRE framework is definitely a great start and a great way of mapping the hunting queries that you do have.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a universal framework, right? So just in terms of accessibility, it makes sense. It's worth flagging actually, so that the section that you covered on threat hunting versus IOC hunting, right? And also so having a threat hunting methodology that uses a framework like MITRE ATT&CK. This isn't necessarily a common thing, right? There are teams out there that are doing IOC hunts basically.
Yeah, a lot of times you can end up kind of just running these hunts against known IPs every month. For me, that is just IOC hunting. And what we have here, I think, is quite a mature way of looking at it, where we've taken this pyramid of pain and challenged ourselves to work at the top of that. And it definitely is harder to make the searches, but you get better results out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, just in terms of wastage, with the SOC being a team that is like driven by efficiency and process, replicating the work that the automation is meant to be doing anyway, that your tools are meant to be doing, doesn't make logical sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You don't want to be hunting for it. As I said before, if you're hunting for file hashes of ransomware and malware, like, your customers would already know that that's on there because they would see this being executed. So you're better taking more time to do less hunts with these harder tactics, techniques, and procedures so that you can find the more subtle activity.
Yeah. Dennis has asked if we know of any alternatives to Microsoft Sentinel, I guess, as well as talking about, might be worth talking about the other tools that we use.
Yeah, so you can threat hunt on nearly any SOC tool. So this example is in Microsoft Sentinel. You can threat hunt with Sentinel-1, which is an EDR tool. You could threat hunt with just a SIEM MDR tool like Alien Vault or Splunk, or Carbon Black, which is another EDR tool. So whichever tool you're using, even down to you're just looking at a Windows computer and looking in Event Viewer, you can still threat hunt.
Yeah. I think during the kind of curation of this webinar, I think you developed a kind of a specialist interest in Sentinel, right? And certainly enjoyed kind of unpacking what it can do.
Yeah, definitely.
Ewan's asked, do you have a preference for blue teaming capture the flag platform or training platforms, cyber defenders, BTLO, etc.?
In my experience, I've used TryHackMe for capture the flags, but I know Hack the Box and Blue Team definitely have really, really good capture the flag tools and great practice on threat hunting. I've not really seen a bad thing said about any of them, so I would recommend just trying them all and seeing which one's your preference.
Yeah. Another one, so Derek's asked, do you recommend ArcSight?
ArcSight. Not actually use that personally, so I wouldn't really know on that.
Cool, no worries. Any more questions from the audience? Cool. Okay, well, like we said, we will follow up with a recording with the slides. If you think of anything else in the meantime, please do send your questions across. And yeah, like I said at the start, please do send your feedback, even if it's just like 30 seconds that you can spare us. Just let us know how it's been. And to you, Curtis, thank you so much for giving us this insight on threat hunting. It was really, really great.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you everyone. Have a really great rest of the day.